You are mid-sentence when it happens. You are saying something true, something you have thought about, something that matters. And then you see it. The glaze, the drift. The eyes that were on you a moment ago now somewhere else. The nod that is not agreement, but dismissal. The shift in posture that says the room has moved on, and you are still standing there, words half-formed in the air, wondering if you even finished your thought. You know this feeling. It is not new. It is the dinner table where you offer an idea and hear only the scrape of forks. It is the meeting where you speak, and the silence that follows is not respect, but void. It is the conversation where halfway through you realize no one is listening. They are waiting. They are scrolling. They are already thinking about what they will say next. And so you stop. You trail off. You laugh a little as if it did not matter. You let someone else pick up the thread. And later, when that same idea comes back around, when someone else says it with different words and everyone leans in, you feel the sting. Not of theft, but of invisibility. This is not about intelligence. You are smart. You know things. You have insights that are real, observations that are sharp, ideas that could shift the room if only they landed. But they do not land. They evaporate. They float past people like smoke, there and then gone, leaving no mark. This is about presence. This is about the gap between what you know and what others hear. The distance between the brilliance in your mind and the flatness in your voice. The difference between speaking and being heard. And you have tried. You have tried speaking louder. You have tried using bigger words, sharper facts, more evidence. You have tried waiting for the perfect moment, rehearsing in your head, building courage. But volume is not influence. Vocabulary is not command. And the perfect moment never comes, because the mechanics of attention do not wait for permission. You have been taught that being right is enough. That knowledge equals authority. That if you just say the correct thing, people will listen. But they do not. And over time something shifts. You speak less. You second-guess more. You swallow sentences before they are born, because you can already see how they will be received, or not received. You start to believe the problem is you, that you are not interesting enough, not confident enough, not worth the room's attention. But that is not true. The truth is simpler and more hopeful than that. You were never taught how to speak in a way that makes people listen. Not in school, not at home, not in the world that rewards content over delivery, information over influence. You learned how to be correct. You did not learn how to be compelling. You absorbed facts. You did not absorb rhythm. You were graded on what you said, never on how it felt to hear you say it. And so here you are, intelligent, thoughtful, full of things worth saying, and silent more often than not, because silence feels safer than the sting of being unheard. But what if that could change? Not through force, not through faking confidence or adopting a persona that does not fit, not through becoming louder or brasher or someone you are not. What if you could learn the mechanics of attention, the architecture of influence, the quiet, repeatable systems that make words land with weight instead of dissolving into air? What if, instead of hoping people listen, you could make it almost impossible for them not to? This is not about charisma you are born with. This is about skill you can build. It is about understanding how the human brain processes sound, structure, and silence. It is about learning the rhythm that pulls people in and the pacing that keeps them there. It is about knowing when to speak, when to pause, and how to deliver a single sentence so that it resonates long after you have stopped talking. By the end of this journey, you will not be trying to get attention. You will command it. Not through dominance, but through clarity. Not through volume, but through presence. You will walk into a room, and when you speak, people will stop. They will turn. They will lean in, because the way you deliver your words will match the value of what you are saying. You will no longer trail off mid-sentence, wondering if anyone cares. You will finish your thoughts and feel them land. You will see the nod that means understanding, the pause that means processing, the question that means engagement. You will know, in your body, that your words have weight. This is about becoming someone whose voice creates silence, not the awkward kind, not the dismissive kind, the listening kind, the kind where people stop what they are doing because something worth hearing is happening, the kind where your presence shifts the energy in the room, not because you demand it, but because you have learned how to earn it. You will speak and people will listen, not because you are louder, not because you are more aggressive, but because you will have mastered the invisible architecture of communication, the structure, the rhythm, the pauses, the tone that turns information into influence. You will learn how to open a conversation so that people want to stay in it. You will learn how to make a point so clearly that it sticks. You will learn how to tell a story that does not meander, but moves, that does not bore, but builds. You will learn how to use silence, not as a gap to fill, but as a tool to wield. And this will change everything. It will change how you show up in meetings, how you navigate conflict, how you connect at dinner parties and job interviews and moments that matter. It will change how you see yourself, not as someone hoping to be heard, but as someone who knows how to make hearing inevitable. This is not about becoming someone else. This is about becoming more fully yourself, about aligning what you think with how you speak, about closing the gap between the brilliance inside you and the way it reaches the world. You have spent enough time being unheard. You have spent enough years swallowing sentences, dimming your voice, believing the lie that the problem is you. It is not you. It is the absence of a framework. It is the lack of tools. It is the gap between what you were taught and what actually works. And that gap closes here. In the next 10 parts, you will move through a system, a progression, a transformation that is not magic but mechanics. You will begin where you are, scattered, uncertain, sometimes invisible, and you will end somewhere new, somewhere solid, somewhere magnetic. You will learn the science of why people listen, the psychology of attention, the neuroscience of persuasion. You will understand how your brain works when you speak and how their brains work when they hear you. You will see that this is not subjective. This is not luck. This is biology, and you can work with it. You will learn the levels of mastery, the stages you will move through as you grow from chaos to clarity to command. You will see where you are now and where you are going. You will have a map. You will learn the core method, the simple, repeatable system that changes everything. 3 elements that turn flat words into sharp ones, that turn monologue into conversation, that turn speaking into listening. You will learn the advanced tools, the layers that deepen your influence once the foundation is set. Vocal tone, story structure, emotional anchoring, the techniques that make people not just hear you, but feel you. You will learn how to sustain this, how to build the habits, the environment, the lifestyle that keeps your voice strong even when life gets loud. Because transformation is not a moment. It is a practice. You will learn how to apply this under pressure, in conflict, in crisis, in the moments when it matters most and your heart is racing and your throat is tight. You will learn how to stay calm, stay clear, and stay compelling even when everything in you wants to shrink. And you will integrate this into who you are, not as a skill you perform, but as an identity you embody. You will not be someone who tries to speak well. You will be someone who does, naturally, consistently, powerfully. This is the promise. You will finish this journey different than you began it. You will speak and people will listen. You will pause and people will wait. You will finish your sentence and feel the silence that follows. Not empty, but full. Full of processing. Full of respect. Full of the understandings that something worth hearing just happened. You are not broken. You are not boring. You are simply unequipped. And equipment can be added. Skills can be built. Presence can be learned. So let us begin. Let us close the gap between what you know and what others hear. Let us turn your intelligence into influence, your thoughts into impact, your voice into something people cannot ignore. You have been silent long enough. Now it is time to speak. And this time, when you do, the room will listen. The room will listen. But first, you need to see the wall, the invisible one, the one you have been running into for years without knowing it was there, the one that stands between your mind and their attention, between what you mean and what they hear, between the brilliance inside you and the blankness on their faces. You have felt it. At the dinner table, surrounded by people you know, people you trust. You say something, an observation, a connection you made between two ideas that seemed obvious once you saw it. You offer it to the group, and the words leave your mouth and hang there for a moment. You wait for the spark of recognition, the nod, the follow-up question. But there is nothing. A half-second of silence, and then someone else starts talking. A different thread, a different topic, and your contribution evaporates as if you never spoke. You sit there, fork in hand, wondering if you said it out loud or only thought you did. And then, 10 minutes later, someone else says it. Not exactly the same words, but the same idea. The same insight, and this time the table lights up. People lean in. They build on it. They laugh. They point at the person who said it and say, "Yes, exactly. That is so true." You sit there and smile, because what else can you do? But inside, something tightens. Not anger, exactly. Not even jealousy. Just a quiet, heavy question. What is the difference? Why did it land when they said it and disappear when I did? This is not isolated. It happens at work. You are in a meeting, and there is a problem on the table. You see a solution. You have thought it through. You wait for a pause, for the right moment to offer it. But the conversation moves fast. People talk over each other. Someone asks a question, and 3 people answer at once. You open your mouth and close it again. The timing never feels right, and so the idea dies in your throat. You tell yourself you will say it later. You tell yourself it probably was not that good anyway. You tell yourself someone else will think of it. And sometimes they do. And when they do, your idea gets executed, and you watch from the sidelines, wondering why you could not just speak up when it mattered. Or worse, the meeting ends with no resolution. The problem still unsolved, your solution still unspoken. And you leave the room carrying the weight of what you did not say. knowing you had something to offer and offered nothing. This is the landscape of being unheard. It is not dramatic. It is not a single catastrophic moment. It is 1,000 small ones. 1,000 times your words did not land. 1,000 conversations where you realized halfway through that no one was actually listening. You are talking, and you can see it in their eyes. They are not with you. They are not following. They are waiting for you to finish so they can say what they came to say. Or they are scrolling. Or they are nodding. But the nod is automatic, mechanical. The kind you give when you have stopped processing and started pretending. And you feel it. The shift. The awareness that you have lost them, if you ever had them. And so you speed up, trying to get to the point faster, trying to make it interesting, trying to earn back their attention. But speeding up only makes it worse. Your sentences tangle. You lose your thread. You start second-guessing mid-word, and now you are not even sure what you were trying to say. So you stop. You trail off. You say never mind. You laugh it off, and the conversation moves on without you, and you are left standing in the gap between what you meant to say and what you actually said, wondering why it is so hard. This is not about intelligence. You know that. You are smart. You read. You think. You have ideas worth sharing. But intelligence does not translate into influence. Knowledge does not equal impact. And the gap between knowing something and making someone else care about it is wider than you were ever told. No one taught you how to cross that gap. You were taught what to say. You were taught to be accurate, to be correct, to back up your claims with evidence. You were taught that the content matters. And it does. But content alone is not enough. Because people do not listen to content. They listen to delivery. They listen to rhythm. They listen to confidence and clarity, and the feeling that what you are saying is worth their attention. And if those elements are missing, the content does not matter. It will not land. And so you have spent years offering valuable ideas in ways that make them feel disposable. You have presented insights without structure, so they sound like rambling. You have shared stories without shape, so they lose people halfway through. You have made points without pauses, so there is no space for them to sink in. You have spoken without varying your tone, so everything sounds the same, and nothing stands out. And the cost of this is not small. It is the dimming of your confidence, the slow erosion of your belief that what you have to say matters. Because if no one listens, it is hard not to internalize that as evidence that you are not worth listening to. You start second-guessing yourself before you speak. You rehearse in your head, trying to find the perfect phrasing, the perfect tone, the perfect moment. But the rehearsal only makes it worse, because by the time you are ready to speak, the moment has passed, the conversation has moved on, and you are left holding your sentence like a stone, heavy and useless. You start speaking less. You start choosing silence more often, because silence is safer. Silence does not risk rejection. Silence does not risk being ignored. And so you retreat. You become the person who listens but doesn't contribute. The person who has thoughts but does not share them. The person who, over time, starts to wonder if they have anything worth sharing at all. This affects everything. It affects your relationships. Because when you cannot make yourself heard, you start to feel distant. You start to feel like you are on the outside of conversations, watching instead of participating. And that distance builds. It becomes a habit. And eventually, people stop expecting you to speak, and you stop expecting them to listen. It affects your career. Because visibility matters, contribution matters. And if your ideas do not land, if your insights do not stick, if you cannot communicate your value clearly and compellingly, you will be overlooked. Not because you are not talented, but because talent without communication is invisible. It affects your self-worth. Because every time you are unheard, a small part of you wonders if it is your fault. If you are not interesting enough, not articulate enough, not confident enough. And those doubts accumulate. They build into a story you tell yourself about who you are and what you are capable of. But that story is not true. You are not the problem. The problem is the absence of a framework, the lack of tools, the gap between what you were taught and what you actually need to be heard. You were taught to focus on what you say. You were never taught how to say it. You were taught to be right. You were never taught to be compelling. You were taught content. You were never taught delivery. And delivery is everything. It is the difference between an idea that lands and an idea that evaporates. It is the difference between a sentence that resonates and a sentence that slides past without a trace. It is the difference between being heard and being ignored. And the cruel irony is that the people who get heard are not always the smartest people in the room. They are not always the ones with the best ideas. They are simply the ones who know how to deliver those ideas in ways that make people listen. They speak with structure, so their points are easy to follow. They speak with rhythm, so their words have music. They speak with pauses, so their ideas have space to land. They speak with confidence, not because they are certain, but because they know how to sound certain. They speak with clarity, not because their thoughts are simple, but because they have learned to simplify complexity. And you can learn this too, because this is not magic. This is not charisma you are born with. This is mechanics. This is skill. This is understanding how attention works and how to work with it instead of against it. You have been working against it. You have been offering brilliant ideas in scattered ways. You have been sharing insights without anchoring them. You have been speaking without structure, without rhythm, without awareness of how your words are being received. And that is not your fault. No one ever showed you another way. But now you are going to see it. You are going to see the invisible wall for what it is. Not a reflection of your worth, but a gap in your skill set. Not a permanent condition, but a solvable problem. Not evidence that you should stay silent, but proof that you need better tools. And those tools exist. They are simple. They are learnable. They are waiting for you in the chapters ahead. But before you can use them, you need to see the problem clearly. You need to name it. You need to understand that being unheard is not about who you are. It is about how you speak. And how you speak can change. It can change starting now, starting with the next conversation, starting with the awareness that there is a better way and you are capable of learning it. You have been invisible long enough. You have dimmed yourself, second-guessed yourself, retreated into silence long enough. You have watched your ideas get ignored and repeated by others long enough. You have carried the weight of unspoken thoughts long enough. Now it is time to learn why this happens, and more importantly, how to make it stop. Now it is time to learn why this happens, and the answer will surprise you, because the reason you go unheard is not what you think. It is not because you are not smart enough. It is not because your ideas lack value. It is not because you are inherently bad at communication or destined to be overlooked. The reason is simpler, more mechanical, and far more fixable than that. The reason is this: intelligence does not equal influence, and until you understand that paradox, you will keep trying to solve the wrong problem. You have been operating under a false equation. You have believed, consciously or not, that if you are smart enough, knowledgeable enough, accurate enough, people will listen, that the quality of your ideas will speak for itself, that being right is the same as being heard. But it is not. Being right and being heard are two entirely different skills, and the tragedy is that no one ever told you this. You were raised in systems that rewarded correctness. School graded you on accuracy, not delivery. Work promotes you for results, not presence. And so you have spent years sharpening one blade while leaving the other dull. You have become excellent at thinking. You have not been taught how to land a thought in someone else's mind. And that gap is everything. Because the human brain does not work the way you think it does. It does not sit patiently, waiting for information, ready to absorb whatever you offer. It does not process words neutrally, valuing content over form. It does not listen to everything equally and then decide what matters. The brain is a filter. It is designed to protect you from overwhelm. Every second, you are surrounded by thousands of stimuli, sounds, sights, sensations, thoughts. If your brain processed all of it, you would collapse under the weight. And so it filters, it prioritizes, it decides, mostly without your conscious awareness, what gets attention and what gets ignored. And here is what it filters for: novelty, emotion, and structure, not information. Not accuracy, not intelligence, novelty, emotion, structure. Let that sink in. Your brain is wired to notice what is new, what feels significant, and what is easy to process. It perks up at the unexpected. It engages with what stirs feeling. It follows what has a clear shape. And if those elements are missing, the brain tunes out. Not because it wants to, because it has to. Because attention is a limited resource, and the brain spends it carefully. This is not personal. This is biology. And this is why smart people go unheard. Because intelligence often works against these principles. Intelligence complicates, it qualifies, it adds nuance and caveats and layers of detail. And while that complexity is valuable, it is not engaging. It does not trigger novelty. It does not stir emotion. It does not have structure. It has the opposite. It has density. And density repels attention. Think about how you speak when you are trying to be smart. You add more context, more background, more explanation. You want to cover all the angles, anticipate all the questions, prove that you have thought this through. And so your sentences grow longer, your points multiply, your delivery becomes a lecture, and people tune out. Not because they are dumb, not because they do not care, but because their brains are doing what brains do. They are filtering, and what you are offering doesn't pass the filter. It is not novel. It sounds like everything else. It is not emotional. It is flat, factual, safe. It is not structured. It meanders, it circles back, it loses the thread, and so it disappears. This is the first reason smart people go unheard. They over-inform and under-engage. The second reason is overthinking. You know this one intimately. You are about to speak, and your mind floods with options. Should I say it this way or that way? Should I start with the context or the conclusion? Should I use this example or a different one? What if they misunderstand? What if they disagree? What if I sound stupid? And while you are thinking all of this, the moment passes. Or worse, you do speak, but the overthinking leaks into your delivery. Your sentences become cluttered. You hedge, you backtrack, you add qualifiers. Maybe, kind of, sort of, I think. Possibly. You sound uncertain, even when you are not. Because overthinking creates verbal clutter, and verbal clutter signals doubt. And doubt repels attention. People do not lean into uncertainty. They lean into clarity. They lean into confidence. Not arrogance, but the calm assurance that you know what you are saying, and you are saying it with intention. And overthinking strips that away. It makes you sound like you are still figuring it out. Like you are not sure. Like maybe this is not worth their time. And so they stop listening. The third reason is anxiety. Anxiety speeds you up. It tightens your throat. It shortens your breath. And when your breath shortens, your pacing quickens. You start speaking faster, trying to get through it, trying to get it over with. And fast speech is hard to follow. It does not give the listener time to process. It does not give your words time to land. It sounds like rushing, and rushing sounds like you do not believe in what you are saying. Anxiety also raises your pitch. It thins your voice, and a thin, high voice does not carry authority. It carries nervousness, and nervousness, again, repels attention, because people mirror energy. If you sound anxious, they feel anxious, and no one wants to feel anxious while listening to someone speak. So they disengage, they look away, they check their phone, they let their mind wander. Not because they are rude, but because staying engaged feels uncomfortable, and the brain avoids discomfort. The fourth reason is the need to prove intelligence. This one is subtle, but it is powerful. When you feel unsure of whether people will take you seriously, you compensate. You use bigger words. You reference more sources. You build more elaborate arguments. You try to demonstrate that you are smart, that you belong in the conversation, that you have earned the right to speak. But this backfires, because the need to prove intelligence makes you sound insecure. It makes you sound like you are performing, not communicating. And performance creates distance. It puts a wall between you and the listener. It says, I am trying to impress you, instead of, I am trying to connect with you. And connection is what makes people listen. Not impression, connection. When you speak to impress, you use language that elevates you and alienates them. When you speak to connect, you use language that meets them where they are. Simple, clear, human. And simplicity is not a sign of shallow thinking. It is a sign of deep understanding. Because only someone who truly understands something can explain it simply. But you were never taught that. You were taught the opposite. You were taught to be right, not compelling. You learned content, not delivery. You absorbed criticism without coaching. You were told what was wrong with how you spoke, but never shown what would work better. You were graded on accuracy, never on resonance. You were rewarded for being correct, never for being clear. And so you optimized for the wrong thing. You built a skill set designed for written tests and formal reports. You learned to pack information densely, to cite sources, to hedge your claims. You learned the language of academia, of professionalism, of proving yourself. And all of that has value in certain contexts, but it does not work in conversation. It does not work in meetings. It does not work at dinner tables. It does not work in moments where attention is voluntary and fragile and easily lost. In those moments, you need different tools. You need to understand that people do not listen with their intellect first. They listen with their nervous system. They listen with their gut. They listen with the part of the brain that decides in milliseconds whether something is worth paying attention to or not. And that part of the brain does not care about credentials. It does not care about vocabulary. It does not care how much you know. It cares about how you make them feel. It cares about whether you sound certain or uncertain, whether you sound calm or anxious, whether you sound clear or cluttered, whether you are easy to follow or exhausting to track. And none of this is about you as a person. This is not a character flaw. This is not evidence that you are broken or inadequate or destined to be unheard. This is a skill gap, and skill gaps close. They close with awareness, with practice, with the right framework. You were never taught how attention works. You were never taught how the brain filters information. You were never taught that delivery matters as much as content, that rhythm matters as much as accuracy, that pauses matter as much as words. But now you know. Now you can see the mechanics. You can see that when you speak and no one listens, it is not because you are unworthy. It is because you are using tools that do not match the task. You are trying to build influence with techniques designed for something else. And that mismatch is fixable. You can learn to speak in ways that work with the brain, not against it. You can learn to create novelty, to stir emotion, to provide structure. You can learn to slow down, to simplify, to sound certain, even when you are still figuring it out. You can learn to stop proving and start connecting. You can learn to close the gap between your intelligence and your influence. Because the gap is not proof of failure, it is proof of potential. It means there is room to grow. It means the tools you need exist, and you simply have not picked them up yet. And you are about to. You are about to learn the mechanics of attention, the science of how people listen, the framework that turns scattered thoughts into sharp ones, that turns anxiety into presence, that turns overthinking into clarity. You are about to see that being heard is not a mystery. It is a system. And systems can be learned. This is not about becoming someone else. This is not about faking confidence or adopting a persona that does not fit. This is about understanding how communication actually works and aligning yourself with those principles. This is about replacing shame with understanding. You are not bad at this because something is wrong with you. You are struggling because you were never equipped, and now you will be. And now you will be. But first, you need to see the map, because transformation is not a switch. It is not a single moment where everything changes and suddenly you are someone different. It is a progression, a series of stages that you move through, each one building on the last, each one bringing you closer to mastery. And right now, you need to know where you are. You need to see where you are going. You need a framework that shows you the path from chaos to command, from being unheard to being unmissable. This is that framework. 4 stages, 4 levels of mastery. And you will recognize yourself in one of them. You will see where you have been, where you are now, and where you are headed. And that clarity alone will change how you speak, because you will no longer be wandering in the dark. You will have direction. So let us begin. Stage 1 is the scatter. This is where most people live most of the time. This is speaking without structure, jumping between ideas, losing the thread mid-sentence and scrambling to find it again. This is when your mouth moves faster than your mind, and your words tumble out in a rush of half-formed thoughts, tangents, and backtracking. You know this stage if you have ever started a sentence and had no idea where it was going. If you have ever said, and then, and then, and then, trying to string together ideas that do not quite connect. If you have ever seen someone's face glaze over while you were talking and thought, I am losing them, but kept talking anyway because stopping felt worse. This is the scatter. And here is what it feels like in real moments. You are at a dinner party, and someone asks what you do. You start to explain, but the explanation branches. You add context, then more context, then a side story that seemed relevant when you started it, but now feels like a detour. You notice people nodding, but the nods are polite, automatic. You are talking, but you are not connecting. You finish, and there is a brief silence, and then someone says, "Oh, interesting," and the conversation moves on. You are in a meeting, and you have something to say. You raise your hand, or you jump in during a pause, and you start speaking. But the idea in your head was clearer than the words coming out. You circle around the point, trying to find it, trying to land it. You say, "What I mean is," and you try again. Someone interrupts with a question, and you lose your place. You answer the question, but now you have forgotten what your original point was. You sit back down, and the idea you wanted to share is still in your head, unspoken. This is the scatter. People tune out not because they do not care. They tune out because they cannot follow. Your words do not have a shape. They do not have a beginning, middle, and end. They do not build toward anything. They just exist, one after another, hoping to land somewhere useful, and the listener's brain cannot hold that. It cannot process information without structure, and so it lets go. It stops trying to follow. It waits for you to finish so it can move on. If you are in this stage, you are not broken. You are simply untrained. You have not yet learned how to organize your thoughts before they become words. You have not yet learned that speaking is not the same as thinking out loud, but you can learn. And when you do, you move to stage 2, the clarity seeker. This is where progress begins. This is where you start to see that structure matters, that organizing your thoughts before you speak makes a difference, that people listen better when you give them a shape to follow. In this stage, you are learning. You are experimenting. You are trying new things. You think before you speak. You outline in your head. First I will say this, then this, then this. You use simple frameworks. You say, there are 3 reasons, and then you list them. You say, let me give you an example, and then you do. And sometimes it works. Sometimes people listen. Sometimes they ask follow-up questions. Sometimes you can see the light of understanding in their eyes, and it feels good. It feels like progress. But it is inconsistent. Some conversations go well. Others do not. Sometimes you remember to structure your thoughts, and sometimes you forget. Sometimes you are calm enough to think clearly, and sometimes anxiety takes over, and you revert to the scatter. Sometimes the framework you choose works, and sometimes it does not fit the moment. You are no longer lost, but you are not yet fluent. Here is what this stage feels like. You are presenting an idea at work. You prepared. You thought it through. You have 3 points, and you deliver them one by one. People are listening. You can feel it. You are clear. You are organized. And when you finish, someone nods and says, that makes sense. You feel the relief, the validation. You did it. But then, in a different conversation, you are caught off guard. Someone asks you a question you were not expecting, and you do not have time to prepare. You stumble, you scatter, you lose the clarity you had 5 minutes ago, and you leave that conversation frustrated, wondering why it is so hard to be consistent. This is the clarity seeker. You are building the skill, but you have not internalized it yet. You can do it when conditions are right, when you have time, when you are calm, when you are prepared. But when conditions are not right, you fall back into old patterns. And that is okay. This stage is not failure. This stage is learning. This is where you build the muscle. This is where you practice until structure becomes second nature, until you no longer have to think about it consciously, until it is just how you speak. And when that happens, you move to stage 3, the confident communicator. This is where consistency arrives. This is where you no longer have to remind yourself to be clear. You just are. This is where you speak with rhythm, pause with intention, and read the room as you go. This is where your delivery matches your message. In this stage, you are no longer performing structure. You are embodying it. You do not think, "Now I will pause." You just pause, because you feel when a pause is needed. You do not think, "Now I will slow down." You just slow down, because you sense that the listener needs time to process. You are present. You are responsive. You are in control. And people notice. They listen, because listening to you feels easy. Your words have flow. Your points land. Your stories have shape. You do not waste their time. You do not make them work to follow you. You guide them. You take them from where they are to where you want them to be, and they go willingly because the path is clear. Here is what this stage feels like. You are in a conversation, and someone disagrees with you. In the past, this would have rattled you. You would have rushed to defend yourself, talked faster, added more evidence. But now, you pause. You listen. You acknowledge their point. And then you respond calmly, clearly, with a structure that makes your position easy to understand. You do not argue. You explain. And by the end, they may not agree, but they respect you. They heard you. You are telling a story at dinner. You know where it is going. You know what the point is. And so you do not rush. You build it. You set the scene. You create tension. You pause before the punchline. And when you deliver it, people laugh, or they lean back, or they nod, because the story worked. It had a shape. It had rhythm. It landed. This is the confident communicator. You are no longer hoping people listen. You are making it easy for them to listen. And that ease creates trust. It creates engagement. It creates the feeling that you know what you are doing, and you do. But there is one more stage, one more level, and it is where mastery lives. Stage 4, the magnetic presence. This is where words become fewer but heavier. This is where silence becomes a tool. This is where attention is not demanded. It is offered. People want to listen to you, not because you are louder or more forceful, but because you have something worth hearing and you know how to deliver it. In this stage, you do not fill space with words. You use space. You let sentences breathe. You trust that what you said will land, and you do not rush to add more. You speak less, but what you speak carries weight. You have learned that presence is not about volume. It is about gravity. It is about the feeling you create in a room when you speak, the feeling that something important is happening, that this moment matters, and people feel it. They feel the pull. They stop what they are doing. They turn toward you. They listen not because they have to, but because they want to. Because your presence has created a space where listening feels natural. Here is what this stage feels like. You are in a room full of people, and someone asks for input. You do not jump in immediately. You wait. You think. And when you speak, your first sentence is quiet, calm, certain. You do not rush. You do not explain more than you need to. You say what needs to be said, and then you stop. And the silence that follows is not awkward. It is full of people processing, full of respect. You are having a difficult conversation. The other person is upset, maybe angry. In the past, you would have matched their energy, defended yourself, filled the air with words. But now, you slow down. You soften your voice. You pause between sentences. You give them space to feel what they are feeling. And your calm becomes their calm. Your presence shifts the room. This is the magnetic presence. You are no longer performing communication. You are living it. It is not something you do. It is something you are. And that changes everything. People remember conversations with you. They quote you. They come back to you when they need clarity, when they need perspective, when they need someone who will listen and speak with weight. This is mastery, and it is available to you. Not someday, not in some distant future when you are a different person. Now, because mastery is not about being perfect. It is about progression. It is about moving from one stage to the next, one conversation at a time, one moment at a time. Right now, you are in one of these stages, and that is exactly where you should be, because you cannot skip stages. You cannot jump from scatter to magnetic presence. You have to walk the path, but now you have the map. Now you know where you are going, and that changes how you walk. And that changes how you walk. But you need tools for the journey, not theories, not abstractions, not vague advice to be more confident or more assertive. You need a system, a repeatable process, a set of techniques you can use in the next conversation, the next meeting, the next moment someone asks you a question and you want your answer to land. This is that system. It has 3 parts. 3 beats, 3 elements that, when combined, transform how people perceive your words. This is not complicated. This is not something you need months to master. This is something you can start using today, right now, the next time you open your mouth. The 3 beats are clarity, rhythm, and pause. That is it. Clarity, rhythm, pause. Master these 3. And you will never be unheard again. Let us start with clarity. Clarity means every sentence does one job, not 2 jobs, not 3. 1. A single sentence should make a single point, create a single image, deliver a single piece of information. And when that job is done, the sentence ends. This is harder than it sounds, because when you speak, especially when you are nervous or excited or trying to prove something, you pack too much into one sentence. You add qualifiers. You hedge. You tangent. You say what you mean, and then you say it again in a different way, and then you add context, and then you clarify the context, and by the end of the sentence, the listener has forgotten what you were trying to say. Clarity is the opposite of that. Clarity is stripping away everything that does not serve the job of the sentence. It is removing filler words, like you, no, kind of, sort of, I think, maybe. It is cutting tangents before they start. It is saying what you mean in the fewest, sharpest words possible. Here is an example. You want to say, I think we should maybe consider possibly moving the meeting to Thursday, if that works for everyone, because I feel like Monday might be a little rushed, given everything we have going on. But I do not know. What do you think? That sentence does not have clarity. It has hesitation, filler, and too many jobs. It is trying to suggest a change, justify the change, and ask for permission all at once, and none of it lands. Here is the same idea with clarity. Let us move the meeting to Thursday. Monday is too tight. 2 sentences. 2 jobs. First sentence makes the suggestion. Second sentence gives the reason. Clean, sharp, clear. The listener does not have to work to understand you. They just do. And that ease is what makes them listen. Clarity is not about being cold or robotic. It is about respecting the listener's attention. It is about saying what you mean without making them dig for it. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. But clarity alone is not enough. Because if every sentence is the same length, the same structure, the same energy, you create monotony. And monotony kills attention. This is where rhythm comes in. Rhythm is variation. It is the music of speech. It is knowing that short sentences create impact and longer sentences create flow. It is knowing when to speed up and when to slow down. It is knowing that the ear craves contrast, and if you give it only one tempo, it tunes out. Think about music. A song that is all one note, all one beat, all the way through, is not a song. It is noise. But a song that moves, that rises and falls, that surprises you and then satisfies you, that is what holds attention. That is what people want to hear again. Your speech works the same way. Short sentences hit hard. They wake people up. They create emphasis. They say, "This matters. Pay attention." Longer sentences give context. They explain. They build. They take the listener on a small journey from one idea to the next, connecting the dots, showing the reasoning, allowing them to follow your thought process. And when you mix the two, you create rhythm. Here is an example. You are explaining why a project failed. You could say, "The project failed because we did not allocate enough resources, and also the timeline was unrealistic, and there was a lack of communication between teams, and no one really took ownership of the final deliverable. That is all one rhythm, all one pace, and it is exhausting to follow. Now try this. The project failed. We did not have enough resources, the timeline was impossible, and no one owned the outcome. We were set up to struggle." See the difference? The first sentence is short. It lands. The second sentence is longer, but it is structured with commas that create internal rhythm. The third sentence is short again. It closes the thought with weight. This is rhythm. And rhythm is not just about sentence length. It is also about pacing, about knowing when to speed up and when to slow down. When you are building to a point, you can speed up slightly, creating momentum. And when you reach the point, you slow down. You let it land. Fast builds energy. Slow builds weight. And the shift between the two is what keeps people engaged, because their brains are anticipating. They are following the music. They are leaning in to see where you are going. But rhythm, like clarity, is not the final piece. Because even with clarity and rhythm, if you never stop, if you never give the listener space, your words pile on top of each other and lose their impact. This is where pause comes in. Pause is the most underused tool in communication, and it is the most powerful. Most people are afraid of silence. They think a pause means they have lost the room. They think silence is awkward, weak, a sign that they do not know what to say next. And so they fill it. They keep talking, even when they have nothing left to say. They rush from one sentence to the next, afraid that if they stop, they will never start again. But silence is not weakness. Silence is emphasis. It is the space between notes that makes music music. It is the breath between sentences that lets the last thought land before the next one begins. It is the moment where the listener processes, absorbs, and prepares for what comes next. When you pause, you signal confidence. You signal that you are not in a hurry, that you are not afraid of silence, that what you just said was worth sitting with for a moment before you move on. And the listener feels that. They feel the weight of the pause. They feel invited to think, to reflect, to catch up. And when you start speaking again, they are ready. They are with you. They are not still processing 3 sentences ago while you are racing ahead. Here is how you use pause. You make a point, you stop, you breathe, you let it sit for 2 seconds, maybe 3, and then you continue. Example: we need to change how we approach this. Pause. The current strategy is not working. Pause. And if we do not shift now, we will lose momentum. See the pauses? They are not long. They are just enough to let each sentence exist on its own, to give it space, to let it land. Without the pauses, it sounds like this. We need to change how we approach this. The current strategy is not working, and if we do not shift now, we will lose momentum. Same words. But without the pauses, it feels rushed. It feels like you are trying to get through it, not trying to be heard. Pauses also work in stories. When you reach the moment of tension, you pause. You let the listener anticipate. You do not rush to the punchline. You let them lean in. Example: I turned the corner, and there it was. Pause. The thing I had been looking for. Pause. Sitting right where I left it, 6 months ago. The pauses build the moment. They let the listener imagine. They create space for the story to breathe. Now let us put all 3 together. Clarity, rhythm, and pause. Let us see what this looks like in real scenarios. Scenario 1. Opening a conversation. You walk into a networking event and someone asks what you do. In the past, you might have said, I work in marketing. Well, more specifically, digital marketing. And I focus mainly on content strategy and social media management for mid-sized companies, although I have also done some work with startups, depending on the project, and I really enjoy the creative side of it, coming up with campaigns and seeing them actually work. That is scattered. No clarity, no rhythm, no pauses. Here is the same idea with the 3-beat system. I help companies tell better stories online. Pause. I build content strategies that turn attention into action. Pause. Mostly for mid-sized companies, but the principles work anywhere. 3 sentences. Each one does one job. Short, then slightly longer, then short again. Pauses between each. The listener hears you. They understand. They can ask a follow-up question, because you gave them something clear to grab onto. Scenario 2. Making a point in a meeting. You have an idea, and you want people to take it seriously. In the past, you might have said, so I was thinking, and this might not be the best idea, but what if we tried a different approach to the campaign? Like maybe instead of focusing on features, we focus on the customer's problem first. Because I think people respond better to that, at least from what I have seen. And I know we have done it the other way before, but I just feel like this could work. No clarity. Too many hedges. No rhythm. No pauses. The idea dies in the delivery. Here is the same idea with the system. I want to suggest a shift. Pause. Instead of leading with features, we lead with the customer's problem. Pause. People buy solutions, not specs. Pause. Let us test it. 4 sentences. Clear, confident, rhythmic. Each one builds on the last. Pauses give weight. The idea lands. Scenario 3. Telling a story at dinner. Someone asks about your weekend, and you have a funny story. In the past, you might have rushed through it, afraid of boring them, jumping from detail to detail without shape. Here is how you tell it with the system. Saturday morning, I woke up to a noise. Pause. A loud, persistent scratching coming from the kitchen. Pause. I walked in and there was a raccoon. Pause. Just sitting on my counter, eating a banana. Short sentences, rhythm. Pauses that build the moment. The story has shape. The listener is with you the whole way, and when you deliver the punchline, it lands because you gave it space. This is the 3-beat system. Clarity, rhythm, pause. It is simple, it is repeatable, and it works immediately. You do not need to wait months to see results. You use it in the next conversation, and the difference is there. People listen, they follow, they stay engaged. This is the foundation. This is what everything else builds on. Master this, and you are no longer hoping to be heard. You are making it inevitable. You are making it inevitable. But there is more. The 3-beat system, clarity, rhythm, and pause, is your foundation. It is what gets people to listen. But if you want people to stay listening, if you want your words to resonate long after the conversation ends, you need to go deeper. You need tools that layer on top of the foundation. Tools that add dimension, warmth, and gravity to everything you say. These are the advanced tools. They are not complicated. They are not tricks. They are refinements. They are the difference between being heard and being remembered, between making a point and making an impact. There are 3 of them: vocal tone, story structure, and emotional anchoring. And you do not need to master all 3 at once. You integrate them slowly, 1 tool per week, 1 conversation at a time, because mastery is not instant. It is cumulative. It is the result of small, consistent improvements that compound over time. So let us begin with the first tool, vocal tone. Your voice carries more information than your words. Before someone processes what you are saying, they process how you are saying it. They hear your pitch, your volume, your pacing, and those elements signal things you may not even intend. A high pitch signals nervousness, uncertainty, youth. A low pitch signals calm, authority, control. A loud volume can signal aggression or passion, depending on context. A soft volume can signal intimacy or weakness, depending on delivery. Fast pacing signals anxiety or excitement. Slow pacing signals thoughtfulness or confidence. And most people have no idea what their voice is doing. They speak at whatever pitch feels natural. They pace at whatever speed anxiety or habit dictates. And they wonder why people do not take them seriously, or why conversations feel off, or why their words do not carry the weight they should. But vocal tone is adjustable. You can learn to control it. You can learn to warm your voice, slow your speed, and drop your register when it matters. Here is how. First, warm your voice. A warm voice is one that has resonance, depth, and ease. It sounds like you are comfortable, like you are not straining, like your throat is open and your breath is full. A cold voice is tight, thin, and strained. It sounds like you are holding back, like you are uncomfortable in your own body. To warm your voice, you breathe. Deep, slow breaths from your diaphragm, not shallow breaths from your chest. Before you speak, especially in high-stakes moments, take 3 deep breaths. Feel your ribs expand. Feel the air fill your belly, and then speak from that fullness. This does 2 things. It lowers your pitch naturally, because a full breath allows your vocal cords to relax. And it slows your pacing because you have air to sustain longer sentences without gasping. Second, slow your speed. Most people speak too fast. Anxiety speeds you up. Excitement speeds you up. The fear of losing someone's attention speeds you up. But fast speech is hard to follow. It doesn't give the listener time to process. It does not give your words time to land. Slow speech does. Slow speech signals confidence. It signals that you are not in a rush, that you trust your words enough to let them breathe, that you are not afraid of silence between sentences. To slow down, focus on the pauses. Do not try to slow down every word. Just extend the pauses between sentences. Add a half second, then a full second. Let each sentence finish completely before the next one begins. This creates space, it creates weight, and it forces you to breathe, which keeps your voice warm. Third, drop your register. Your register is the general pitch range you speak in, and lower is almost always better. Lower pitch carries authority. It sounds calm, grounded, certain. Higher pitch, especially when it rises at the end of sentences, sounds uncertain. It sounds like you are asking for permission, like you are not sure if what you are saying is right. To drop your register, relax your throat. Do not push. Do not force a deep voice that is not yours. Just relax. Breathe deeply, and speak from your chest, not your throat. Imagine the sound coming from lower in your body. Imagine it resonating in your ribs, not just your mouth. And practice. Record yourself speaking. Listen back. Notice where your pitch rises. Notice where you sound strained. And adjust. Gradually, over weeks, your natural register will drop. Not dramatically, but enough to change how people perceive you. Now, vocal tone is powerful, but tone without content is empty. You need something to say. And the way you structure what you say matters as much as how you say it. This is where story structure comes in. People do not just want information. They want narrative. They want a journey. They want to feel like they are going somewhere when you speak, not just standing still while you dump facts on them. And every good story, every compelling explanation, every memorable anecdote follows the same basic structure: setup, tension, and resolution. Setup is where you establish the context. You tell the listener what they need to know to understand what comes next. You set the scene. You introduce the characters, the problem, the stakes. But you do it briefly. You do not linger here. You give just enough to orient them, and then you move. Tension is where you build. You introduce the conflict, the challenge, the question that needs answering. You create uncertainty. You make the listener wonder what will happen next. This is where you hold their attention. This is where they lean in. Resolution is where you deliver. You answer the question. You resolve the conflict. You provide the insight, the lesson, the punchline. You give them the payoff for staying with you through the tension. This structure works for everything, not just stories, explanations, arguments, presentations, casual conversations. Here is an example. You are explaining why a project succeeded. Without structure, you might say, the project went well because we had good communication and everyone was aligned and we hit our deadlines and the client was happy. That is flat. No journey. No tension. No reason to care. Here is the same explanation with structure. Setup. We started this project 3 months behind schedule. The client was nervous. The team was stretched. Tension. Halfway through, we realized our original approach would not work. We had to pivot. We had to rebuild the timeline. and we had one shot to get it right. Resolution. We did. We shipped on time. The client called it the best work we had ever done for them. See the difference? Same information. But now it has shape. It has a journey. The listener feels the struggle and the triumph. They care about the outcome because you made them care about the process. You can use this structure in meetings, in pitches, in dinner conversations. Anytime you have something to explain, ask yourself, what is the setup? What is the tension? What is the resolution? And then deliver it in that order. But structure and tone are still not enough, because people do not make decisions based on logic alone. They make decisions based on how they feel. And if you want to persuade, if you want to influence, you need to connect your ideas to emotions they already have. This is emotional anchoring. Emotional anchoring is the practice of linking your message to feelings people already carry. Fear, hope, pride, frustration, relief, connection. You are not creating new emotions. You are tapping into existing ones and showing how your idea relates to them. Logic informs, but emotion persuades. Here is how it works. You are trying to convince your team to adopt a new process. You could say, this new process is more efficient. It will save us 2 hours per week. It is a better system. That is logical. It is true. But it does not land. Because efficiency is abstract. 2 hours per week is a number. Better is vague. Now try this. You know that feeling at the end of the week when you are scrambling to finish reports and you are staying late and you are exhausted? Pause. This process eliminates that. Pause. You leave on time. You have your evenings back. You stop dreading Fridays. Same idea. But now it is anchored to an emotion they already feel. The frustration of scrambling, the exhaustion of staying late, the relief of leaving on time. You made them feel the problem, and then you made them feel the solution. Emotional anchoring works in stories, in arguments, in explanations. You find the feeling and you name it. You do not assume they feel it. You describe it so specifically that they recognize it in themselves. Here is another example. You are pitching a product. Without emotional anchoring, you might say, this app helps you stay organized. It has reminders and task lists and a clean interface. That is features. That is not feelings. Now try this. You know that moment when you remember something important 2 hours too late? Pause. The sinking feeling, the scramble to fix it, the stress that follows you the rest of the day. Pause. This app stops that moment from happening. Now the listener is not hearing about features. They are feeling the problem you solve, and feeling is what moves people. To use emotional anchoring, ask yourself, what does my listener already feel about this topic? What frustrates them? What excites them? What do they fear? What do they hope for? And then connect your message to that. Do not manufacture emotion. Do not manipulate. Just illuminate. Show them how what you are saying relates to what they already care about. And when you do that, logic and emotion move together. The listener understands and feels at the same time, and that combination is what creates lasting influence. So now you have the advanced tools: vocal tone to signal authority and warmth, story structure to give your words shape, emotional anchoring to connect ideas to feelings, and you integrate them slowly. This week, focus on vocal tone. Practice breathing deeply before you speak. Notice your pacing. Record yourself and listen back. Adjust. Next week, add story structure. Every time you explain something, ask yourself, what is the setup, the tension, the resolution? Shape your words accordingly. The week after, add emotional anchoring. Before you make a point, ask yourself, What does my listener feel about this? And connect your message to that feeling. One tool at a time. One conversation at a time. Because mastery is not a destination. It is a direction. It is the accumulation of small improvements practiced consistently until they become automatic. Until you do not think about warming your voice, you just do it. Until you do not think about story structure, you just speak in stories. Until emotional anchoring is not a technique, but a reflex. This is how influence deepens. Not all at once, but layer by layer. And you are building those layers now. And you are building those layers now. But layers alone will not hold if the foundation beneath them is weak. You can learn every technique. You can master clarity, rhythm, pause, tone, structure, and emotional anchoring. You can practice them until they feel natural. But if you are exhausted, if your mind is cluttered, if your environment undermines you, those techniques will not sustain. They will work for a day, maybe a week, and then they will fade. Not because you failed, but because you built skill without infrastructure. Sustained influence requires more than skill. It requires conditions that support clarity, energy, and presence. It requires a lifestyle that reinforces what you are trying to become, not one that drains it away. This is the shift from technique to foundation, from what you do in the moment to what you do every day, from performance to sustainability. And it begins with something most people ignore: rest. You cannot speak well when you are tired. Fatigue dulls your articulation. It slows your processing. It flattens your tone. It makes every sentence harder to construct, every word harder to find. You know this if you have ever tried to have an important conversation at the end of a long day. Your brain is fog. Your voice is thin. Your points do not land the way they should because you do not have the energy to deliver them with clarity. Sleep is not optional for communicators. It is not a luxury. It is not something you sacrifice when you are busy. It is the foundation of everything else. Because your brain needs rest to function. It needs rest to organize thoughts. It needs rest to regulate tone. It needs rest to stay present in a conversation instead of drifting, distracted, barely holding on. When you sleep well, you think faster. You speak clearer. You access vocabulary you could not reach when you were tired. You notice nuance. You read the room. You adjust in real time. You are present, and presence is what makes people listen. When you do not sleep well, none of that happens. You survive the conversation, but you do not lead it. You get through it, but you do not make an impact. And over time, chronic fatigue becomes your baseline. You forget what it feels like to speak from a place of full energy. You start to believe this diminished version of yourself is all you are capable of. But it is not. You are capable of so much more when you are rested. And rest is a choice. It is a discipline. It is protecting your sleep the way you would protect any other critical resource. It is saying no to late nights that do not matter. It is creating a routine that winds you down. It is treating sleep as non-negotiable, because without it, everything else you are building collapses. But rest is only part of the foundation. The second part is input quality. What you consume shapes how you think, and how you think shapes how you speak. If you fill your mind with shallow content, with outrage, with noise, with distraction, that is what will come out when you speak. Your thoughts will be scattered. Your references will be surface level. Your language will be reactive, not reflective. But if you consume quality, if you read widely, listen deeply, engage with ideas that challenge you, Your mind becomes sharper. Your vocabulary expands. Your thinking becomes more nuanced. And when you speak, you have something worth saying, and you have the language to say it well. This is not about being intellectual. This is not about reading only classics or avoiding entertainment. This is about curation. This is about being intentional with what you allow into your mind. Ask yourself, what am I reading? What am I listening to? What am I watching? And is it making me sharper, or is it making me duller? If you scroll social media for an hour before bed, you are feeding your mind fragmented thoughts, reactive takes, and surface-level arguments. And that will show up in how you speak. You will speak in fragments. You will react instead of respond. You will struggle to go deep because you have trained your mind to stay shallow. But if you read a book, listen to a long-form conversation, engage with an essay that makes you think, you are training your mind to follow complex threads, to build arguments, to sit with ideas long enough to understand them. And that shows up in how you speak. You speak with depth. You make connections. You bring insights that others miss because you have given yourself the input required to generate them. Curate your mental diet the way you would curate your physical one. What you put in matters. And over time, quality input becomes quality output. The third part of the foundation is daily rehearsal. Not rehearsal of scripts, not memorizing what you will say in specific situations, but rehearsal of the skill itself, sharpening, practicing, keeping your communication muscles active so they do not atrophy. Here is what daily rehearsal looks like. Every day, take a complex idea, something you read, something you are working on, something you are thinking about, and summarize it in one sentence, out loud, not in your head, out loud. This forces clarity. It forces you to strip away everything unnecessary and find the core. And the more you do this, the better you get at it. The skill of distilling complexity into simplicity becomes automatic. Record yourself. Not every day, but once a week. Record a 2-minute explanation of something, anything. Then listen back. Do not cringe. Do not judge. Just notice. Notice where you hesitated. Notice where you used filler words. Notice where your pacing was off. Notice where your tone was flat. And then try again. Record the same explanation, adjusting for what you noticed. You will hear the difference. And over time, you will stop making the same mistakes, because you have trained yourself to hear them. Speak aloud to an empty room. This sounds strange, but it works. When you are alone, practice saying things out loud. Practice opening a conversation. Practice making a point. Practice telling a story. Do not just think it. Say it. Because thinking and speaking are not the same. Speaking engages different parts of your brain. It forces you to commit to words, to pace, to tone. And the more you practice speaking when no one is listening, the easier it becomes to speak when everyone is. Daily rehearsal is not about perfection. It is about maintenance. It is about keeping the skill sharp so that when the moment comes, you are ready. You do not have to warm up. You do not have to find your footing. You are already there. The fourth part of the foundation is environment design. You become the voices you hear most. If you surround yourself with people who interrupt, who do not listen, who speak over you, you will internalize that. You will start to believe that is how conversation works. You will adopt their habits. You will interrupt. You will stop listening. You will speak over others. Not because you want to, but because that is the environment you are in, and environments shape behavior. But if you surround yourself with people who listen, who pause, who ask thoughtful questions, who model the communication you aspire to, you will rise to that level. You will start to listen better. You will start to pause more. You will start to ask better questions because you are immersed in it, because you are seeing it modeled every day. Environment design is intentional. It is choosing who you spend time with. It is seeking out people who communicate well and learning from them. It is distancing yourself, when possible, from environments that reward volume over clarity, aggression over thoughtfulness. This does not mean you abandon everyone who does not communicate perfectly. It means you are strategic. It means you notice who makes you better and who makes you worse, and you lean toward the people who make you better. It also means creating space for silence, for reflection, for time alone where you are not consuming, not performing, not engaging, just thinking. Because your best ideas, your clearest thoughts, do not come in the noise. They come in the quiet. And if your life has no quiet, you will never access them. Design your environment to support the person you are becoming, not the person you were, not the person everyone expects you to be, the person you are becoming. This is the infrastructure of transformation: rest, input quality, daily rehearsal, environment design. These are not techniques you use in conversations. These are the conditions that make every conversation better. These are the habits that ensure the skills you are building do not fade when motivation dips, when life gets hard, when you are tired or distracted or overwhelmed. Because motivation fades. It always does. You will wake up some days and not want to practice. You will have weeks where you forget everything you learned. You will have moments where you revert to old patterns, where you scatter, where you rush, where you go unheard. And that is okay, because the infrastructure holds, the habits hold, the environment holds, and when you come back, and you will come back, the foundation is still there. You do not start over. You pick up where you left off. This is how transformation becomes permanent. Not through a single decision, but through 1,000 small ones. Not through intensity, but through consistency. Not through trying harder, but through building better conditions. You are not just learning to speak well. You are building a life that makes speaking well inevitable. A life where rest supports your energy, where input sharpens your mind, where rehearsal keeps your skills active, where your environment reinforces the person you are becoming. This is long-term success, and it starts today. With one choice, one habit, one adjustment to the conditions around you, the techniques will make you better in the moment. But the infrastructure will make you better for life. The infrastructure will make you better for life. But you need to understand why it works. Because everything you have learned so far is not opinion. It is not preference. It is not a style choice or a personality trait. It is biology. It is the mechanics of how the human brain processes sound, structure, and meaning. And when you understand those mechanics, you stop hoping your words will land. You start knowing they will. This is the science behind the system. Let us start with the brain itself, specifically the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for executive function. It organizes information, it makes decisions, it plans, it processes language, and it has a preference: structure. When you hear structured information, information that has a clear beginning, middle, and end, information that is organized into categories or steps or logical sequences, Your prefrontal cortex processes it efficiently. It knows where to file it. It knows how the pieces fit together. It can retrieve it later because it was stored in an organized way. But when you hear scattered information, thoughts that jump from topic to topic, sentences that do not connect, ideas that have no clear order, your prefrontal cortex struggles. It cannot organize what has no organization. It cannot file what has no structure. And so it does what any overwhelmed system does. It discards most of it. It lets it go. It keeps only fragments, if anything. This is why clarity and structure are not optional. They are requirements, because the brain literally cannot hold on to information that does not have shape. When you speak with clarity, when every sentence does one job, when your points follow a logical order, when you use frameworks that organize your thoughts, you are working with the prefrontal cortex, not against it. You are giving the listener's brain what it needs to process, retain, and act on what you are saying. When you speak without clarity, you are asking the brain to do work it is not designed to do, and it will not. It will tune out, not because the listener does not care, but because their brain cannot keep up. This is not about intelligence. Smart people have the same prefrontal cortex as everyone else, and even the smartest listener will lose the thread if you do not give them a thread to follow. But structure alone is not enough to create connection. Connection happens deeper. It happens in the mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are cells in your brain that fire when you observe someone else doing something. If you watch someone smile, your mirror neurons fire as if you are smiling. If you watch someone in pain, your mirror neurons fire as if you are in pain. This is the biological basis of empathy. This is how you feel what others feel without experiencing it yourself. And mirror neurons fire during communication. When you speak and the listener feels understood, their mirror neurons activate. They are not just hearing your words, they are resonating with them. They are experiencing what you are describing, and that resonance creates trust. It creates connection. It makes them feel like you get them, like you are on their side, like what you are saying matters because it reflects something they already feel. But if you speak and the listener does not feel understood, if your words miss the mark, if you describe experiences they do not recognize, if you fail to name what they are feeling, their mirror neurons stay quiet. There is no resonance, there is no connection, and without connection, there is no trust. This is why emotional anchoring works. When you connect your message to feelings the listener already has, you activate their mirror neurons. You create resonance. You make them feel seen. And when people feel seen, they listen. But even with structure and resonance, the brain has limits. It can only hold so much at once. This is the concept of cognitive load. Cognitive load is the amount of mental effort required to process information, and the brain has a finite capacity. If you overload it, if you pack too much information into too little time, if you use complex language when simple would work, if you present 10 ideas when 3 would suffice, the brain shuts down. It cannot process everything, so it processes nothing. The information bounces off. This is why simple, clear messages stick. Not because they are dumbed down, but because they respect the brain's capacity. They give the brain what it can handle. They leave space for processing. They do not overwhelm. Complex, cluttered messages do the opposite. They demand too much. They ask the brain to track multiple threads, to decode jargon, to hold competing ideas at once. And the brain cannot do it. So it lets go. It stops trying. and you lose the listener, this is not about making your ideas simple. It is about making your delivery simple. You can communicate complex ideas in simple language. You can explain nuance without cluttering. You just have to respect the brain's limits. And there is another principle to respect: primacy and recency effects. Research shows that people remember what they hear first and what they hear last. The beginning and the end carry the most weight. Everything in the middle fades. This is why openings matter. If you start weak, if you bury your main point in context and preamble, the listener's brain doesn't flag it as important. It drifts. It waits for something worth remembering, and by the time you get to the point, the brain has already moved on. But if you start strong, if your first sentence is clear, compelling, and immediately relevant, the brain locks in. It flags this as worth remembering. It pays attention. And that attention carries through the rest of what you say. The same is true for endings. If you trail off, if you end with, "and yeah, so that is it," the brain does not encode the message as complete. It feels unfinished. It doesn't stick. But if you end strong, if your final sentence summarizes, reinforces, or delivers a clear takeaway, the brain encodes it. It remembers. And that memory is what shapes how the listener feels about the entire conversation. So what you say first and what you say last are not just words. They are anchors. They are the parts of your message that the brain holds on to when everything else fades. But content is not the only thing the brain tracks. It also tracks how you sound. And this is where prosody comes in. Prosody is the melody of speech. It is the rise and fall of your pitch, the variation in your volume, the rhythm of your pacing. And prosody carries emotion. It signals how you feel about what you are saying. And that feeling is contagious. When you speak in a monotone, when every sentence has the same pitch, the same volume, the same pace, you signal that what you are saying is not important. Your lack of variation tells the listener's brain that this is routine, automatic, not worth emotional engagement. And so the brain tunes out, not consciously, automatically. But when you vary your prosody, when your pitch rises to emphasize a point, when your volume drops to create intimacy, when your pacing slows to signal weight, you signal that this matters. You create emotional texture. And the listener's brain responds. It engages. It leans in. This is emotional contagion. When you sound excited, the listener feels excitement. When you sound calm, the listener feels calm. When you sound certain, the listener feels certainty. Your prosody does not just describe emotion, it transmits it. And transmission is persuasion. Because people are moved by how they feel, not just by what they think. Logic informs, emotion persuades, and prosody is the bridge between the two. But there is one more piece, one more mechanism that keeps the brain engaged: dopamine and anticipation. Dopamine is the brain's reward chemical. It is released when you experience something pleasurable. But it is also released when you anticipate something pleasurable. And anticipation is what keeps you engaged. When you pause before delivering a key point, you create anticipation. The listener's brain knows something is coming. It releases dopamine. It leans in. It waits. And when you deliver, the dopamine spikes again. The brain feels rewarded, and it remembers. When you ask a question and let it hang for a moment before answering, you create anticipation. The listener's brain wants the answer. It is primed to receive it. And when you provide it, the information sticks because the brain was ready for it. When you build narrative tension, when you introduce a problem and let the listener wonder how it will be solved, you create anticipation. The brain stays engaged because it wants resolution. It wants the story to complete, and it will stay with you until it does. This is why pauses, questions, and narrative structure are so powerful. They are not just rhetorical devices. They are biological triggers. They work with the brain's wiring. They use dopamine to sustain attention, to create engagement, to make your message memorable. And here is what all of this means. Everything you have learned, clarity, rhythm, pause, tone, structure, emotional anchoring, is not arbitrary. It is not a matter of taste. It is rooted in how the brain works, in how the prefrontal cortex organizes information, in how mirror neurons create resonance, in how cognitive load determines what sticks and what bounces off, in how primacy and recency shape memory, in how prosody transmits emotion, in how dopamine sustains attention. This is biology. This is how humans are wired. And you can work with that wiring, or you can work against it. You can speak in ways that overload the brain, that fail to create resonance, that ignore the limits of cognitive load, and you will be unheard. Or you can speak in ways that align with how the brain processes language. You can use structure to help the prefrontal cortex. You can use emotional anchoring to activate mirror neurons. You can simplify to reduce cognitive load. You can start and end strong to leverage primacy and recency. You can vary your prosody to transmit emotion. You can use pauses and questions to trigger dopamine. And when you do, you are not just speaking well. You are speaking the language the brain understands. You are working with biology, not against it. This is not manipulation. This is alignment. This is understanding how communication actually works and using that understanding to make sure your message reaches the people who need to hear it. And now you know. Now you understand why the techniques work. Now you see the mechanics beneath the methods. And that knowledge changes everything, because you are no longer guessing. You are no longer hoping. You know what works, and you know why. And now you know. But knowing is not the same as doing, because you can master every technique in a calm moment. You can practice clarity when there is no pressure. You can rehearse rhythm when the stakes are low. You can perfect your pauses when no one is watching. But none of that matters if it all falls apart the moment the stakes rise. And the stakes will rise. You will find yourself in a heated argument where your heart is pounding and your thoughts are racing. You will face a high-stakes pitch where one conversation could change your career. You will speak and watch your words fall flat, and you will have to decide in real time whether to recover or retreat. You will be questioned, challenged, dismissed. And in those moments when emotions are loud and pressure is high, the real test begins. This is where mastery shows. Not when it is easy, but when it is hard. So let us walk through the moments that matter most. Let us show you how to apply these tools when everything in you wants to abandon them, when your instinct is to rush, to defend, to shut down, when staying calm feels impossible. The heated argument. You are in conflict. Someone has said something that stung, or they have misunderstood you, or they are blaming you for something that is not your fault, and your body responds before your mind does. Your heart rate spikes, your breath shortens, your jaw tightens, and every instinct tells you to fight back, to defend, to speak faster, louder, harder. But that is the moment you slow down, not because you are weak, because you are in control. When you feel the heat rising, that is your signal. Breathe. Deep, slow breath. Not a gasp. A full inhale through your nose. A long exhale through your mouth. This does two things. It lowers your heart rate, and it gives you 3 seconds to think before you speak. In those 3 seconds, you ask yourself one question. What is my actual point? Not what I want to say to hurt them. Not what I want to say to win. What is the actual point I need them to understand? And then you say that. Only that. In one clear sentence. Example, you are arguing with a colleague who is accusing you of missing a deadline. Your instinct is to list all the reasons it was not your fault, to explain the chaos, to justify yourself. But that will escalate. That will scatter. That will make the argument bigger, not smaller. Instead, you slow down. You breathe, and you say, I missed the deadline. I take responsibility. Let us talk about how to prevent this next time. Short, clear, no defensiveness, no excuses, just the truth and a path forward. And then you pause. You do not fill the silence. You do not keep talking to soften the blow. You let your words land. You let the other person process. And in that pause, the heat drops. Because you didn't meet their anger with anger. You met it with clarity. Now they have to respond. And because you didn't escalate, they are less likely to escalate. The argument doesn't spiral. It stabilizes. This is how you de-escalate conflict. Not by backing down, not by agreeing when you do not agree, but by slowing down, clarifying your point, and pausing instead of piling on. And the next part is harder, listening. When someone is upset, your instinct is to prepare your response while they are talking, to reload, to find the flaw in their argument so you can counter it. But that is not listening. That is waiting to speak. Listening is different. Listening is letting go of your response and actually hearing what they are saying. Not just the words, the feeling beneath the words, the fear, the frustration, the hurt. And when they finish, you do not jump in. You pause. You reflect back what you heard. Example. So what I am hearing is that you felt blindsided by the delay. You needed more notice. Is that right? This does 2 things. It shows them you were actually listening, and it gives them a chance to clarify. Maybe they say yes, exactly. Or maybe they say no. It is more than that. Either way, you are now talking about the real issue, not the surface one. This is how you navigate conflict without losing yourself. You slow down, you clarify, you pause, you listen, and you stay in control, not because you dominate, but because you do not let emotion dominate you. The high-stakes pitch. Now the stakes are different. You are not in conflict. You are in opportunity. You have one chance to make your case. One meeting. One presentation. One pitch that could change your career, your company, your trajectory. And you cannot afford to waste it. So you start with a hook. Not context. Not background. Not thanking everyone for their time. A hook. One sentence that makes them want to hear what comes next. Example. You are pitching a new product. You could start with, thank you all for being here. I want to talk to you today about a product we have been developing. It is something we think could be really valuable. That is weak. That is wasted time. No one is hooked. Instead, you start with, we are losing 30% of our customers in the first 60 days. I have a way to cut that in half. Now they are listening. Now they want to know how. Now you have their attention. And you do not waste it. You structure your case. You use the setup, tension, resolution framework. You say, here is the problem. Here is why it is costing us. Here is the solution. Here is what it will take. Here is what I need from you. Clear, structured, no tangents, no over-explaining. Just the core argument, delivered with rhythm and pauses that let each point land. And then you close with a clear ask. Not, "So yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts," or "Let me know what you think," or "If you have any questions, feel free to reach out." That is diffusion. That is giving them permission to ignore you. Instead, I need approval to move forward by Friday. Can I count on your support? Direct, clear, specific. You are not asking them to think about it. You are asking them to decide. But here is what happens sometimes. Someone interrupts. Someone challenges your numbers. Someone asks a question that derails your flow. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can get flustered, lose your thread, scramble to recover. Or you can stay composed. You pause. You acknowledge the question. You say, "That is a good point. Let me address that. And then I will finish the case." And then you answer briefly, not defensively, not with a 10-minute tangent, just enough to satisfy the question. And then you return to your structure. Example, you asked about the cost. It is $80,000 up front with a 2-year ROI. Now, back to the timeline. You did not ignore them. You didn't let them derail you. You stayed in control. And that composure signals confidence. It signals that you know what you are doing, even under pressure. The moment of failure. But sometimes, despite everything, it does not work. You give the pitch, and the room stays cold. You make the argument, and no one responds. You tell the story, and it falls flat. And in that moment, doubt creeps in. You think, "I failed. I am bad at this. I should stop trying," but failure is not the end. Failure is information. When your words do not land, you do not retreat. You recalibrate. You pause. You assess. You ask yourself, what did I miss? Was my hook weak? Was my structure unclear? Did I misjudge the room? And then you adjust. Example, you are in a meeting, and your idea gets no traction. Instead of sitting back in silence, you say, "I do not think I explained that clearly. Let me try again." And you do. You reframe. You simplify. You find a different angle. You do not give up. You adapt. Or maybe the moment is not right. Maybe the room is not ready. And that is okay. You do not force it. You let it go for now. But you do not internalize it as failure. You internalize it as timing. Because not every moment is your moment. Not every room is your room. And learning to distinguish between "I did this poorly" and "this was not the right time" is a skill in itself. But when you do fail, when you genuinely mess up, you own it. You do not make excuses. You do not blame the audience. You say, "That did not land the way I wanted it to. I will work on it." And then you do. You review. You listen back if you recorded it. You notice what went wrong. And you practice it differently next time. This is resilience, not pretending you are perfect, but refusing to let failure silence you. Grace under scrutiny. And then there is the hardest test. The moment when you are questioned, challenged, dismissed. When someone says, "I do not think that will work," or "I disagree," or "You are wrong." And every instinct tells you to defend, to justify, to prove yourself. But you do not. You pause. You breathe. And you respond with curiosity, not defensiveness. Example. Someone says your idea will not work. Instead of saying, "Yes, it will, here is why," you say, "What concerns you most about it?" Now they have to articulate. Now you have information. And instead of a fight, you have a conversation. Or someone dismisses you entirely. They talk over you. They ignore your point. And you have to decide, do I shrink or do I hold my ground? You hold your ground, but not with aggression, with calm repetition. Example, you made a point and someone ignored it. You wait for a pause, and then you say calmly, "I want to return to the point I made earlier." I think it is worth considering. You did not yell. You did not escalate. You just restated. And that steadiness, that refusal to be erased, commands respect. This is grace under scrutiny. Staying calm when questioned, staying clear when challenged, staying present when dismissed. This is where mastery lives, not in the easy moments, but in the hard ones. And when you can do this, when you can stay composed under pressure, you prove to yourself that you are not fragile. You are adaptable. You are strong. Pressure does not break you. It sharpens you. Pressure does not break you. It sharpens you. And now, something has changed. You are not the same person who began this journey. You are not the person who trailed off mid-sentence, wondering if anyone cared. You are not the person who rehearsed conversations in your head and still could not find the words when the moment came. You are not the person who sat in silence, watching others claim your ideas, feeling invisible. That person is gone, not because you erased them, but because you outgrew them. You built something new on top of who you were. You added tools. You added understanding. You added practice. And now, when you speak, something is different. You no longer rehearse confidence. You embody it. You no longer hope people will listen. You expect it. Not with arrogance, with quiet certainty. Because you have earned it. You have learned the mechanics. You have practiced the pauses. You have built the infrastructure. And now, when you open your mouth, you know what will happen. Your words will land. Not every time, not perfectly, but consistently, reliably, in ways that matter, because you are no longer trying to be heard. You are simply speaking, and people listen, not because you demand it, not because you are louder or more forceful, but because you have made it impossible not to. This is the new identity. You are someone whose words carry weight, whose pauses command attention, whose voice shapes rooms. This is not performance. This is not a mask you put on when you need to impress someone. This is alignment. What you think, what you say, and how you say it now move as one. There is no gap between the brilliance in your mind and the clarity in your voice. There is no lag between feeling something and being able to articulate it. There is no hesitation, no second guessing, no wondering if you should speak or stay silent. You speak. And when you do, it matters. You walk into a room and the energy shifts. Not because you announced yourself, but because your presence is felt. You contribute to a conversation, and people stop. They turn. They listen. Because the way you deliver your words signals that what you are saying is worth their attention. And it is. Because you have stopped wasting words. You have stopped filling space with filler. You have stopped over-explaining, over-justifying, over-apologizing. You say what you mean. You say it clearly. You say it with rhythm and pauses that let it breathe. And then you stop. And in that stopping, in that silence, people process. They absorb. They respect. You are no longer the person who talks and wonders if anyone is listening. You are the person people quote later. The person they come back to when they need clarity. The person whose words linger long after the conversation ends. This is transformation. And it extends beyond the words themselves. It changes how you move through the world. You have deeper conversations now. Because you are not afraid of silence. You are not filling every gap with noise. You ask questions and you wait for real answers. You listen, not to respond, but to understand. And people feel that. They open up, they trust you. They share things they do not share with others, because they know you will hear them. Your relationships strengthen, because you are present, because when someone speaks, you are not planning your next sentence. You are with them, and when you speak, they know you mean what you say. There is no ambiguity, no guessing, just clarity. And clarity builds trust. Your career gains momentum, because visibility is no longer a struggle. You are seen, you are heard, your ideas stick, your contributions are recognized, not because you are pushing harder, but because you are communicating better. And in a world where most people scatter their thoughts and hope something lands, your clarity is rare, and rare is valuable. But the deepest change is internal. You have the quiet satisfaction of being understood, of saying something and watching it register, of finishing a sentence and seeing the nod that says, yes, I get it, that makes sense, of no longer carrying the weight of unspoken thoughts because you have learned to speak them clearly and confidently. This is not about being the loudest voice in the room. This is about resonance. Resonance is when your words match the frequency of what people need to hear, when your message aligns with their experience, their struggle, their hope, when what you say does not just inform them, it moves them. And resonance does not come from volume. It comes from alignment, from knowing what to say, how to say it, and when to let silence do the work. You have learned that influence is not about dominating. It is about connecting. It is about making people feel something when you speak. Not because you manipulated them, but because you spoke truthfully, clearly, and with presence. And that presence begins with you. It begins with the rest you prioritize, the input you curate, the practice you commit to, the environment you design. It begins with the decision to stop hoping you will be heard and start building the skills that make being heard inevitable. You are never unworthy of attention. Read that again. You are never unworthy of attention. You were never the problem. You were simply unequipped. You did not have the tools. You did not understand the mechanics. You did not know that communication is a skill, not a gift. That presence can be learned. That clarity can be practiced. That influence can be built. But now you know. Now you understand how the brain processes structure, how mirror neurons create connection, how cognitive load determines what sticks, how primacy and recency shape memory, how prosody transmits emotion, how dopamine sustains attention. Now you have the tools: clarity, rhythm, pause, vocal tone, story structure, emotional anchoring, the infrastructure of rest, input, rehearsal, and environment. Now you know how to speak when the stakes are low, and how to speak when the stakes are high, how to navigate conflict without escalating, how to deliver a pitch without losing composure, how to recover from failure without retreating into silence, how to hold your ground under scrutiny without breaking. And now, when you speak, people listen, not because you demand it, but because you have made it impossible not to. Your words are clear. Your rhythm is varied. Your pauses are intentional. Your tone carries warmth and authority. Your structure guides the listener from where they are to where you want them to be. Your message resonates because it connects to what they already feel, and they listen. Because listening to you is easy. Because following you is natural. Because what you are saying matters, and the way you are saying it makes that obvious. This is who you are now. Not someone trying to be heard. Someone who is heard. Not someone hoping to make an impact. Someone who makes an impact every time you speak, because you have aligned your voice with your vision. And this is just the beginning, because now that you have the foundation, now that you have the skills, now that you have proven to yourself that you can do this, you will keep growing. You will keep refining. You will keep noticing what works and what does not. You will keep practicing. You will keep becoming more of who you are meant to be. And the rooms you walk into will feel it. The conversations you enter will shift because of it. The people you speak to will remember you because of it. Not because you performed, but because you were present, because you spoke with clarity and confidence and care, because your words carried weight, and that weight came from alignment. This is transformation. You are no longer the person who goes unheard. You are the person people lean in to hear. You are the person whose voice creates the good kind of silence, the listening kind, the kind where people stop what they are doing because something worth hearing is happening. And it is happening because of you, because you decided to learn, because you decided to practice, because you decided that being unheard was not a life sentence, it was a skill gap, and skill gaps close. You closed it. And now, when you speak, the world listens. Not because you are louder, not because you are more aggressive, not because you are performing a version of yourself that is not real, but because you are aligned, because what you think, what you feel, and what you say now move as one. Because you have learned the language the brain understands, because you respect the mechanics of attention and work with them, not against them. This is who you are now, someone whose words matter, someone whose presence shapes conversations, someone who no longer wonders if they will be heard, because they know they will. And that knowing changes everything. You walk differently now. You speak differently now. You exist in rooms differently now. Not because you are trying to, but because you are different. You are no longer trying to speak smart and make people listen. You are speaking smart, and people are listening. This is your voice. This is your power. This is your transformation. And it is only the beginning.